Somewhere Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 57, Chapter 11, Great Expectations. Auntie Inko died 2 weeks later. His mom had come home sobbing and screaming, throwing around names and blame and saying every curse word in the dictionary, and even some Katsuki didn't know. When his father had pulled her into her chest, petting her hair and whispering, she slapped at his chest and cried harder, before going completely limp. Deku didn't come back to school. When he asked his mother where he had gone, not because he cared about the nerd, because he didn't, but because it was odd, and Katsuki was supposed to learn whatever he could, right? She said that he had gone to live with a relative. Katsuki didn't bother asking why Deku hadn't gone to live with his father. His parents never told him why Unki Hizashi had disappeared and left his family, but Katsuki knew enough to make an inference. He didn't like his conclusion, and he thought that maybe it was better if he went to live with a relative, instead of going to live with his dad. Maybe that was for the best. He doubted Unki Hizashi would have treated Deku right, should he live with him. It took a long time for the funeral to happen. Katsuki lost track of the days. Week? Maybe a month? Maybe less than a week. Time had been funny lately, with the house so empty feeling and quiet. Without his mother's barked yelling and his father's hesitant, placing tone, they hardly made a sound. Sat on the couch and stared at the television and didn't say anything at all. It made Katsuki feel a little empty too. Katsuki had found out how Auntie Inko had died 3 days before her funeral. He wasn't sure what the word meant at first, and his father had explained it better. Suicide. What an odd word. Auntie Inko had just killed herself. She had taken a bottle of pills, and she had just gone. It felt as though the word should be uglier, eviler. Suicide had killed Auntie Inko. It should have a worse word, right? It should feel... But no. Suicide. An empty term for an empty feeling. The word didn't feel like it meant anything. Katsuki wanted to make a new word. Make a new term. He wanted to grab the word, mold it like wet clay, turn it into something new, something that fit. His father had told him that Deku had found her body, that a social worker had been the one who took Deku, that he was living at an uncle's house, at Auntie Inko's brother's house, but that he would be there at the funeral. Katsuki had said, "Why should I care?" Katsuki had felt relieved, because maybe, if he saw him, he could make the connection in his mind. The connection that said, hey, Deku's alive. He's not dead like Auntie Inko. He's alive. That connection would be joyous. The connection that would make the worried feeling stop, melt away into something else, and disappear. That connection would fix everything. He would move on with his life. Train, start school, start feeling less like an empty word. His father had driven them to church, where the funeral took place. Katsuki hadn't been to church in a year, not since he was 3 years old, when his parents had been out of town and they had sent them away with Auntie Inko. Auntie Inko had been a Christian, even though it wasn't very common in the city where they lived. She said that some great-grandfather or grandfather of a grandfather had emancipated from England, and that their family had followed Catholicism ever since. Unki Hizashi had been Shinto, so he'd never really gone to church with her, but Auntie Inko had said she made an effort to go on the last Sunday of every month. Izuku had usually stayed home with his father, since he could never sit still. But he went that time, since Unki Hizashi's boss had requested he work weekends. Katsuki had learned the word for this gathering, Mass. The pew had been frozen, and the priest had drowned on about a Bible story for what felt like hours. There had been quite a bit of old people sitting around them, and their stares in the back of Katsuki's head made him feel uncomfortable, like they were judging him too. Everyone always seemed to be judging him. Deku had fallen asleep in the pew, leaning against Auntie Inko's side, but instead of scolding him, she just brushed the bangs out of his eyes and chuckled quietly a low, airy sound. The church, where they had been having the funeral, was like that. Quiet. Katsuki had been afraid to move, afraid to shift in place, at least the seat under him crinkle soundly like tissue paper. Deku had waved to him before the service had started, but he had no idea where he was now, when everyone had stood up to view the casket, his mother forcing him to stand, even though not even his own morbid curiosity could shake how much he did not want to see a dead body. There had been a whimpering cry from the back of the room. So quiet, Katsuki wasn't sure a lot of people had heard it. He turned just in time to see Deku and two tall men, one with long black hair and one with straight blonde hair, leave the church. Auntie Inko's body had been pale and lifeless, not moving, not even a twitch, or the rise and fall of her chest. Nothing to prove she was alive, breathing, present. He looked away as soon as he saw her. His mother didn't seem to mind. His parents stayed staring at the woman, at the body, for a very long time, not moving. Katsuki had found himself thinking, "Wake up. Please just wake up. Just wake up. Don't be dead. Just wake up." She hadn't woken up. A childish part of Katsuki, the part that still believed in magic and the Tooth Fairy, couldn't help but be surprised. When they reached the cemetery, Deku and the two men already there. It was a sunny day, even though it felt like it shouldn't have been. Deku looked tired, like he had been crying, and he looked much cleaner than he had last time Katsuki had seen him. The pastor said a prayer, and Auntie Inko's casket was lowered into the ground. Gone. The crowd disappeared, but his mother didn't start back towards the car, so his father didn't move towards it either. Instead, after a moment, she marched towards Deku and the two men. She was holding Katsuki's hand. Katsuki wanted to yank against it, to run back towards the car and hide in the back seat, and wait for everything to end. For his parents to come back to the car so they could go home, so Katsuki could take a shower and forget how pale Auntie Inko's skin had been. He didn't. His father didn't follow them. Katsuki envied him. "You're Inko's brother," his mother said, looking the dark-haired man up and down. "She never mentioned you." She wouldn't have. There was something sad there, something bitter, but the man remained expressionless. His gaze never wandered. "I see. I don't like that kid, but you better take care of him." Her voice was threatening. She was one of the sharpest things in Katsuki's world. A blade's deadly edge. "I'm sorry about your mother, Izuku." Deku nodded hesitantly, stared down at his shoes. Katsuki stood by, slipping his hands out of his mother's once her grip was laxer. "That's all I wanted to say." She marched away. That's how his mother walked. She marched, in determination and anger, to cover up the nervousness. It didn't matter. She would march. The dark-haired man stared after her. Katsuki clenched his fist. He could be determined too. He could march. He cleared his throat. The dark-haired man looked down at him. I don't like Deku either," he exclaimed, but he hated how his voice shook. "But be nice to him, please." He had to say that, to tell them, be nice to Deku. Be better than Hizashi. Be nice. The dark-haired man nodded. "I miss you, Ka-chan," Deku said, voice small. "Will you go to the park with me again? With me and Ankisho and Hizashi? You live far away, but..." "I can't, nerd," Katsuki said gruffly. Deku didn't look as surprised, as amused as he would have been before. "She won't..." He stopped. What was he doing? Why was he here? "I'm sorry about Auntie." He looked back up at the dark-haired man, trying to make his face as threatening as possible. "Remember what I said. Be nice to Deku. And take care of him, like Mom said to." He marched away, just like his mother had. Katsuki would not walk. He would march. Katsuki came back to the cemetery a few weeks shy of a year later, on the day that Auntie Inko had died. It was a few weeks into the summer vacation, and his mother hadn't told him where they were going beforehand, had merely thrown some of his nicer clothes at him and told him to get ready. The car drive was an hour long. His mother sat on the grass in front of her tombstone, and the look she had on her face was so sad, so devastated, that it made Katsuki uncomfortable. Things had gotten better after the funeral, but his mother still got quiet every time his mother was mentioned. Still got that faraway look in her eye that told him she wasn't all there. Those were the days when the house felt most empty. When Deku and the two other men walked into the cemetery, Katsuki knew that no good thing was waiting. His mother would get angry, or the two men would get angry, or Katsuki would get angry, and then nothing good would happen. But Deku didn't give anyone a chance to get mad, because he was Deku. He ran forward, looked tired but happier than Katsuki had seen him in ages, and grabbed Katsuki and hugged him. He didn't move. He couldn't stop himself from glancing over at his mother. His mother was too busy staring at the tombstone to even notice Deku. Katsuki patted the boy's shoulder before shoving him off. "It's been so long since I've last seen you, Kachan," the boy exclaimed. He looked different now. His hair was a bit longer. The usual rat's nests were combed out as well. He had more freckles, but Deku always got more freckles in the summer. Before, Deku had been diagnosed quirkless, and his mother had stopped having nice things to say about him. She called his freckles polka dots. Katsuki had always thought that was a bit stupid, because they didn't look like polka dots. They looked like freckles. His mother had always laughed and ruffled his hair and told him that he simply didn't get the joke. His mother had lost her easygoing attitude towards him when his quirk had come in too. Katsuki looked at his mother one last time. Looked at Deku. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad, talking to Deku. Maybe if he talked to Deku when no one was paying attention, he wouldn't look weak. He walked away. There was a tree in the middle of the cemetery, a crabapple tree with pink budding leaves and flowers. Deku said something to the two men before hurrying to follow him. He sat down under the tree, head leaning back against the bark, listened to the wind, listened to Deku's huffing breaths as he tried to keep up, his feet paddling against the grass. "Hi, Kachan," Deku said, sitting next to him under the tree. Katsuki looked at him and tried to imagine shifting through all that rubble, taking out something and leaving others. It didn't seem horrible. "Hey, Deku," he said, and that felt liberating. It felt freeing, like a million things, a million lies had been ripped away, exposed and torn to pieces, and left in a trash bin. It felt like he didn't have to be Katsuki anymore. Katsuki was cruel and loud and obnoxious and horrible, even to the people he cared about. Kachan was afraid to be weak, terrified of it, scared of people seeing him, and scared of his mother, and scared of himself, scared of everything. But he still said hello to his friends. Katsuki wasn't sure he remembered how to be Kachan anymore. But he could try. He could say hello. He could be there. He could start out. Deku's eyes brightened, like Kachan had just given him his favorite thing in the world, or like Kachan had given him 1,000,000 yen. He hated that look. He'd hated it before. Deku looked at him like he hung all the stars in the sky, because Katsuki knew he was awesome. He didn't always feel it, but he knew it. But he hadn't done half the things Deku thought him capable of. Katsuki frowned, stared down at the ground. "Are you okay, Kachan?" And wasn't Katsuki supposed to ask Deku that question? Wasn't that supposed to be a question for Deku? "I'm fine, you useless nerd," Katsuki snapped, and he felt as if the rubble had buried everything deep down, all over again. Deku flinched, frowned in that way that said he was in deep thought, or that he was about to cry. There was no way of knowing the difference, not with Deku. "What happened to you, Kachan?" he finally asked. Katsuki wasn't sure how to answer that question. Hours later, he left the cemetery with Deku's home address and a stern order to write. And Katsuki wouldn't. He knew he wouldn't. Because Katsuki didn't associate with Deku. Couldn't. But maybe Kachan could. I just want to say This whole Kachan Katsuki is reminding me a lot of Jinx powder, obviously in different ways and shapes. Katsuki is what I would describe as what Bakugo, his persona. He puts it on, and that's who he pretends to be. This confident person who has no insecurities, who's not weak, and can be a hero. Kachan is who he actually is. A scared kid who is insecure, who only wants praises from people and wants to be what everybody expects him to be. Everybody's putting these expectations on him, and he's trying to meet those expectations. Katsuki is those expectations. Kachan is just a scared kid who all he wants to do is be friends with Izuku. But he can't, because Izuku is no longer an option because Izuku's weak. And Katsuki being with Izuku and being friends with Izuku means he's weak. But that's not the case, obviously. But he's a kid. He doesn't know that. He's a kid. And he's being put these horrible expectations. And you could see it in this chapter, both episode 57 and episode 56. You could see how much this distorts his view. And clearly we get to see the fact that Kachan's gonna try to befriend Izuku again. Because clearly we could see that he actually does care for Izuku, right? When he says hi to Izuku, it feels as though all the weight is taken away because he's finally able to be himself, right? So I really hope that we get to see Bakugo and Izuku maybe write to each other. I would love that. I don't remember seeing any of that, but we're reaching to the point. I think we're like 2 chapters away from the fact that I no longer know anything. So we're reaching towards that point where it's like, oh, well, I have no idea what's gonna happen now. But yeah, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see this whole thing, this whole layout. And I can't wait to see more of it. I really love the way that they're sculpting how Bakugo's character is. It really forms how I feel like his character is as well. In My Hero Academia main, Bakugo's character is, in my opinion, one of the most well thought out and developed characters. Even more developed than Izuku himself. Izuku can be a bit two-dimensional at times. And there's not enough 3D-dimensional stuff, right? In the sense of character development, he actually kind of recesses. And I wish we touched upon that more. I wish we could see that more in his recession, in his pulling away. He goes from weak to strong to recessing again. I just wish we could see certain points and stuff. I wish we could point out, I wish there was a certain moment where we say that is the last time Izuku's fully happy before everything goes down, right? We don't really get to see that. We do see the recession of him, but it's not enough, right? And he doesn't have like a big character development kind of thing. His character kind of underdevelops, right? It goes from, he does go through arcs, don't get me wrong. He does go through moments where he realizes stuff and stuff like that, but it's not enough. It's not critical. Not like Bakugo's. Bakugo's is true character development. When you think of character development, you think of Bakugo's, because he is challenging everything that is him. All his self-worth, all that is him, all that he has done, he's looking back at it and he's changing. And we see that. We see the points. We can tell the points where we could be like, oh, this is where we finally starts to see the fruit of his change, right? And this is where we finally get to see the full extent of change, right? Clearly, the fruit of his change, I think the first time I could see where his character goes from this is just like from my memory of watching, is there's this certain episode in, I believe, season 2 or season 3. It's one of those 2 seasons where after the ground beta fight, Bakugo, or Izuku asked Bakugo for like, hey, we fought. Did you like my new moves? How was it? Right? Old Bakugo, right? Episode 1, season 1 Bakugo would scoff and tell Izuku to fuck off. This Bakugo didn't even scoff. His voice kind of goes soft. He wasn't angry, he wasn't shouting, he was just soft. And yes, he was still insulting. He's like, your works need a little move. I could see and I could predict you. But he's giving criticism. He's helping Izuku. This is like the first moment where we could fully see The fact that, like, the first moment where you could see where we're not having to dissect his interactions and stuff, where we're like, hold up. That's a change, right? And clearly a more bigger change that we see is obviously Bakugo's apology. That is the biggest change. I know some people said that Bakugo's character development came out of like left field. No, it didn't. They've been building it up from season 1. Love to see that build up. I love it. And it's one of my favorites. So Bakugo is one of my favorite characters written wise, if I have to choose on what's the best character written wise, story wise, and stuff like that, right? A character that I would love to see developed more as well would be Bakugo, because I would really love to touch upon how did he even become the Bakugo we know him as, right? And we see him develop into a completely new Bakugo, or as I like to say, Kachan. I mean, they do this in the show. Spoiler alert for the manga. They do kind of a similar thing. It's not as big as this fanfic or something like in Arcane, but it's something as small as Bakugo calling himself Kachan, where it's like, there, that's Kachan. That's Kachan, right? That's not Bakugo. That's not Lord Explosion Murder Dynamite. That is Kachan. That is his new self. His self that isn't just a motherfucking bully. Yes, he is still rough around the edges. That has not changed, but he's softer. He's better. We even see it in the way that he's drawn in My Hero Academia main. But yeah, Bakugo is one of my favorite characters. You could tell I'm going on a whole rant about it. If I have to list like my favorite characters personality-wise, like I love, it would have to be Eraserhead, Aizawa. No, that's the same person. Eraserhead, Present Mike, Deku, and Hitoshi, right? But if you have to tell me which is my favorite character in story-wise, development and stuff like that, it would have to be Bakugo. I love talking about Bakugo and his development through the arc and all things like that. Izuku's another one out there. I really love what they did with him, but I wish they did more. For the most part, when I talk about Izuku is what I would have fixed. When I talk about Bakugo is what I love that they did. There's a difference, right? I like talking about Aizawa as well. I think he's a lost character in the sense where we don't get enough of him, and we lost out in certain certain things. I mean, he's a character that's developed, but he's like a side character in a way. He's developed enough where it would have been amazing to see. I mean, I would love to touch upon his grief. I mean, imagine if we would have touched upon his grief from season 1. Like, we could see moments during that fight where maybe we don't hear him saying stuff, but like there's certain moments where it's like, hold up, that's weird, right? Maybe it could just be where, for example, where Izuku's about to get, or not Izuku, it was Sue, where Sue's about to get like literally hand-face Shigaraki. Maybe Aizawa, instead of just, looking, we could have maybe had Aizawa either some imagery of it starts to rain when Aizawa is like staring, like we see rain, or maybe in his pupils. Instead of seeing reflections of what's happening, we can see maybe rubble and rain, right? I feel like that would have been subtle enough of foreshadowing where we've been like, hold up, why is he thinking that? Why is only in that moment where he's doing that it's raining? Or why is there that image in his mind? Or maybe even a flash of Oboro, right? Like instead of seeing Sue, like we see Sue about to get demolished, right? About to get disintegrated. And Aizawa in his mind doesn't see Sue. He starts to see Oboro. Stuff like that, right? Touch upon that. Like you don't have to do exactly that, but we could talk about it more and see what would work better. But stuff like that. Or, things like that where it's like, you guys lost him. Or Present Mike. Oh my god, Present Mike. I love Present Mike, and I wish we touched upon him a whole lot more, but we don't. He's just like a comedic relief character, and I hate it. I hate it. Comedic relief characters are shit because they don't get enough love. They need development. I don't want a character to just serve one purpose. Don't get me wrong. Characters can serve one purpose while also being more than just that one purpose, Like, I hate in romantic movies where the love interest is just the love interest, or in, for example, shonen anime, where love interest is demolished and made into just a love interest. They kind of did it with Ochako for a little bit, where she goes from being this really interesting character who's, her arc of being like, yes, I want to be a hero because of the money, because I want to save my family from ruin. I want them to live a comfortable life. That is an interesting premise. We have someone being like the main group with Izuku, Ida, and I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna go on a whole rant. Oh my god, I've been meaning to make a My Hero Academia podcast, but I ended up not doing that. Instead, I did the My Hero Academia Reacts. I need to go back on that and rant there. You guys would love to hear that there, not here. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.